What are you doing?
I'm reading a new book, Dean.
Of course you are, because this segment is completely unscripted. I can tell you this, without it being scripted at all, that many in the Pontian community at the very least are excited about this book. So why don't we just start from the very, very beginning. What's an Ipiroti doing writing a book on, and a Samyoti, mind you, writing a book about Pontians? Isn't this our culture? You got no right to actually start writing books about our culture without asking for our permission? Did you ask for our permission? No, I didn't.
Then what was the inspiration?
Sumela and the Magic Kemenche. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can't get more Pontian than that. That is true. And there's a reason for that, is because we do want to talk about Pondos. We want to talk about Pondos in different ways. I mean, all my adult life, and this year's been 20 years since I started being actively involved in the Pontian community.
Right.
It is my 20-year anniversary. All my adult life, I've been trying to find interesting ways to engage with Pondos. And you can do it in various ways. We have your dancing, we have your food, we have our organisations, we have the genocide, which is a very important component of modern-day Pontian identity. But also you have this remarkable 3,000-year-old history,
Right.
which is just amazing. You have Pondos being at the crossroads of civilizations, at the terminal, the western end of the Silk Road, a place that informed Georgian and Armenian nationalities as well as Greek nationalities. The native Laz who were there before all of us. So all of these things are interesting. And when you couple that with the major event, which, as I said earlier, has marked Pondos and the Pontian identity, which is the fact that there was a genocide and all the Pontic Greeks had to leave, well then you're looking at identity through different eyes, but then you're also looking at the ethical and spiritual component. Around the world, sadly, since the beginning of the 20th century, humanity has been committing and experiencing genocides. And this was one of the first ones in the modern era, the Pontian genocide, as a component of the broader Greek genocide.
Yeah.
Now, the way it works is this. I'm a dad, and I've got 3 young kids. And when you're a dad, you concern yourself with one major enterprise, if you like, which is how do you pass on your culture and your memories and your values to your children. Now, within our culture, memories, values are embedded this story, the story of having to leave one's homeland once to go somewhere else, and why, as a backstory to us leaving Greece to coming here, because that's a parallel. How do you convey that to children who are young without hurting them, without damaging them, without scaring them? And that was, if you like, the rationale, the background behind trying to write this book to begin with.
So let's go and talk a little bit about, so we got an idea now of the rationale or the inspiration and what you were trying to convey. I think I've already cut to the book, but I'm going to cut to it again here. And what I wanted to do is I really wanted to give people who are watching this video a pretty good idea of the...
Nobody's watching this video, Pete.
the
Nobody.
5 people that usually watch, Dean, okay?
It's just the cat, you know this.
I wanted to give an idea of the size of the book and the quality.
It's not the size that counts. I've told you this before. It's what you do with it.
Did you have a say in the way it would be presented? Because it's actually quite large.
Okay, let's talk about that and who the publisher is. The publisher is St. Andrew's Orthodox Press.
Okay.
St. Andrew's Orthodox Press is the publishing house of the Theological College of our Archdiocese, which is the St. Andrew's Theological College.
Right.
Not many people know this, but it produces every year, it publishes a substantial number of scholarly works, very good and important scholarly works. We're at the cutting edge of Orthodox scholarship in the world.
I had no idea.
Absolutely. Brilliant stuff. And our Archbishop Makarios, ever since he's arrived here and has seen and tried to spend some time determining what our needs are, is really invested in the education of children.
Right.
And he sees, I mean, it is a well-masticated trope that children are the future, but it's absolutely true.
Right.
And if we don't focus on the kids, if we're not communicating to the kids certain values, things that we want to pass on, we're going to lose them. Those stories will not be told. So when I came up with the idea of this book, And I spoke to him about it. And when I showed him the text, because he wanted to have a look at it,
Right.
and he had a say in the way, he provided some valuable suggestions along the way as well. He was very, very keen to have this thing published under the imprint of St. Andrews.
Wow.
Because he really believes that there is not enough literature written by us for our own community's children. And that is important.
I would agree. I would go one further and say that
You're not allowed to go one further than our Archbishop.
good literature. Good literature.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I think he'll agree with that. And that's the point. That's the point.
Okay, so I think that's what's very important.
And the difference is this. There are books which are currently being written, and it's especially by mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed this. There's a few which deal with our life here.
Right.
But those books generally
Mm-hmm.
deal with the Greek-Australian way of life. Going to see
Yeah.
your Yam Papu,
Yeah.
Easter, what do we do at Easter here in Greek Australia?
Traditions and what
that,
have you.
that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of thing, and that's good. But what about the backstory?
Yeah.
How are we communicating the backstory?
Yeah.
How are we communicating 4,000 years of memory, culture, literature,
Good question.
which is the background towards the formation of our
Absolutely.
identity? We're not doing that.
No.
And there's a void there. And I'm trying to at least show, by writing this book, that there possibly is a way that we can contribute to informing children, providing them with some resources about that backstory, and offering different perspectives.
The audience you had in mind, age group, specifically for this type of story?
Okay. It's a story which originally I was pitching it towards 8 to 12-year-olds.
Okay.
My daughter was 7 when I was writing this,
Mhm.
and I've said this before to people, but it was during lockdown last year, and she says to me, "Dad, you're always writing stories, but you never write anything for kids." And I always had a story, an idea that I wanted to write a story about a Magic Kemenche, magic litter, that somehow is doing something supernatural and is drawing people to it. But I hadn't developed it. I would mention it to sundry Pondians, and they would laugh nervously and walk away. But I thought, you know what, this is a great opportunity. Let's thrash this out. Let's see what we can do with it. And we wrote the story. And what I've found since the book's published, Pete, is that it's appealing to people even from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the teachers in some of our local Greek schools are reading it to kids in kindergarten age, and they're telling me that the kids are riveted. I'm getting feedback from people that have ordered the book.
Fantastic.
I'm getting feedback from teachers who are reading the book to their kids online.
Brilliant.
And in classes, and even devising teaching units around the book, which for me is really pleasing,
Mm-hmm.
because it shows that it can be used as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that people as old as in their 80s are writing to me saying, we're enjoying this book.
Even in their 80s?
In their 80s, and they're saying, the thing about this book, what they're enjoying, and I'm glad that this is working out, is that it appeals to people from 0 to 100.
Absolutely.
Because it's a story which has layers, and it can appeal to people in different ways. You can read it when you're 10 and get certain things out of it. You can read it when you're older and appreciate certain other nuances that you're not ready to grasp when you're of a young age. So that's the thing. It's a disarming little tale,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm hoping that I've packed a decent amount of nuance, memory, and message in it.
Sort of book that you can probably read as a bedtime story to your kids. Does it last about... How long does it take to basically read it from cover to cover?
I've never read it from cover to cover. I
No?
only wrote it from cover to cover. Only joking. Look, I don't know if you could fit it into a full bedtime, unless you got kids like mine that never sleep. So fell Mikalo, we don't want to sleep. You could if you wanted to, but I think it's best to split it up. It's written in Greek and English.
I can see that. So
Yeah,
it's
so
English
there's
here, Greek
it's
over
a
there.
parallel text. It's not an exact translation,
Yeah.
because I don't believe in exact
Yeah, they're the
translations.
best. They're the best kind, Dean.
I believe
Yeah.
that the story has to tell itself,
Yeah, absolutely.
and one can't just be a copy or an apomimsis of the other.
Yeah.
And the way you write in English is different to the way you write in
Yeah,
Greek.
that's right.
The way you speak,
Mm.
the cultural references, the
Mm.
tropes, all
Yeah.
of that is different when you're
Yeah.
telling a tale, because at the end of the day, it is a fairy story. And when
Yeah.
you write a fairy story, you need to start with Miafora Kilangiro,
Mm-hmm.
and then you need to finish with, if not Kezisa Naftikala Kyoli Ke Miskalitera,
Mm-hmm.
it has to have a happy ending, because at the young age, children need to know that things are going to work out. That's what the fairy tale does.
Right.
You're put through a trial, You're put through a challenge, you're put through danger, but everything works out well in the end. And that's also a cautionary tale to re-establish the commitment of all of us to a better humanity.
I've just opened it up now. I've had a very brief look at a copy when I first came in, but now I'm actually having, the first time I'm able to sort of sit there, start looking at some of the nuances with regards to the publication, and probably want to get into the story a little more. But for starters, let me just talk. I want to talk a little bit about visually what sort of
excellent. That's a great question.
Strikes me. So the very first thing I've noticed, and I'm going to clip over here, is that the layout changes from page to page.
Yeah, it does.
So two pictures here, and you can even notice that even in this section here, you've got Spanaias.
Yep.
In the background, so it's very engaging visually. So there's always, from what I can see, a lot happening and something that really captures the eye. Done specifically to be able to keep the kids engaged and keeping them turning the page.
We have a very fine graphic artist and layout expert at St. Andrew's Orthodox Press, Father Stefanos, and it was his idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it was
it was his idea to lay it out in such a way to extract, if you like, the utmost engagement of the reader with the text. And I think that, as you say, I mean, I'm glad that you're saying this, because when I saw what he had done, I was very impressed, and I thought that is a very good way of maintaining the interest. And the images speak for themselves. The images were created by Stefanos Eleftheriadis.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
I think we should.
Yeah, we should, shouldn't we?
And there's a picture of Stefanos at the end of the book, and I'm sure that the viewers can find it, and you could flick through it right now and find it if you wanted to.
Okay,
because
let's just go there now.
Yeah, we're gonna go and find Stefanos. Where is Stefanos? He's right there.
There he is.
Yeah, there's Stefanos.
And that's him actually at Sumela, right?
And that photo there of Spanagia Sumela Monastery was actually taken by him when he visited, I think in 2019, August.
Yeah.
He being a Pondian and invested in all things Pondian. You can't tell by the T-shirt, of course. And he's a very, very talented artist. And a man who wears Pondos very close to his heart.
Yeah, he does.
I would argue that his heart is Pondos shaped. How that works biologically, I don't know. So I think it was fate that brought us together.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful to him, because he enthusiastically agreed to.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, he agreed to illustrate the text. I feel that he understood the text. He understood what I wanted to say. I didn't have to explain too many things to him.
Yeah.
Which is always difficult when someone else is entering your world. And ours is a world of writing. His is the visual world. But he picked it up straight away, and I think he did a very decent job.
I'll tell you what. The use of colours has been phenomenal. I mean, look at this. Just by looking at the colours already, I know that we're getting, and you can tell from the pictures as well, but even the colours behind the text, we go from something light and to something pretty dark.
Okay, so you've just mentioned that. Now, if you're reading to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you don't have to read the words, because they're not going to get it. All you can do is get them to interpret the pictures.
Yeah.
And what Stefano has done is lends itself very, very easily to that task.
Yeah.
The kids will understand through the colours the change of atmosphere. The emotion is conveyed even if you're not referring to the words.
Yeah.
And for me, in a children's book, the pictures are more important than the actual words, because they need to tell the story, and the words are basically dispensable depending on which age you're pitching at. That's why I'm saying it's multiple age pitched.
Let's talk a bit about the story.
Let's talk about the story. Okay.
All right. So, in a nutshell, what is it that we're actually reading about? Who's the main character? Who's the protagonist? And why?
Well, that's a difficult question. Who is the major protagonist? You need to read the book to really consider that. The book is called Sumela and the Magic Kemenche.
Right.
So automatically, who is the main protagonist? Is it Sumela, the young girl who lives in Pondos? Or is it this Magic Kemenche that is the main protagonist? I don't have the answer to that question. That's for the reader to decide.
Okay.
But there are two main characters, and one of them is not a human being. It's a magical instrument. It's a Magic Kemenche. Some people ask me why you were using the word Kemenche instead of the word lira. Actually, I had a Pondian guy ask me this question very pointedly. Why did you use Kemenche, which is Turkish, and not lira? And I said, because the word lira is only for white people.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Okay. Why did you use Kemenche?
Simply because that is the word that Pondians use when they're amongst themselves. They don't call it a lira. A lira could refer to any lira. You can even have a Calabrian lira, Politiki lira, Constantinople, Cretan lira, but Kemenche, when you say the word Kemenche, you refer specifically to that instrument.
Correct,
it's got an exotic feel. For someone to get their words around that, then that's the password for entry into this Pondic world, I think. It acts as a password for me. So that's why I specifically chose that word instead of lira.
Okay, and inspiration for choosing a girl as opposed to a boy?
I have a daughter.
Yeah.
I sat there and I wrote the story with her.
Oh, really?
Now, what's the most...
She actually had her...
Yeah, she was next to me. I was writing, I was reading, she was approving, and that's how it went.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like a script editor.
I don't know. I wouldn't know anything about script editors, but yeah, that's how it happened. And I was basically telling her the story as I was going along.
Wow.
And that's the thing. I think that when you're writing a book which is directed towards kids, it's a good idea to tell them the story. And you can imagine you're telling them the story, or you can actually try it on them, which is what I did.
So you were actually getting feedback from your daughter as you were writing it.
Yeah.
Did you make any suggested changes to the structure or the any aspects of the story as you were going through?
Look, that has to do with our own editorial processes. There is a confidentially agreement that was signed, and her lawyers are not letting me reveal the extent of her input. But I can tell you that there was a lot of input. She's illustrated one of the pictures in the book as well. So that's towards the back. I mean, she was 7 at the time. Bear in mind. So one has to be kind. But that story here, this is her interpretation of Sumela lost in the forest.
You got that in there as well.
Yeah, so I'm telling her the story, and then she goes off and draws this picture. And for me, that was useful for me because it gave me an indication of how a child views the text. But we were talking about the story.
We were talking about the story. Got distracted again. But
that's okay.
So we'll start with Sumela.
So here's Sumela, and Sumela is a young girl, and she lives in Pondos with her mother. And it's a very happy existence. And then one day there's a war. So her mum says, you need to go into the forest. In the meantime, they're living, as the first picture in the book shows, they're living in the foothills of the Mount Mela, which is where the Panagia Sumela monastery is situated. Obviously a very, very important place culturally and religiously for Pontic Hellenism. It's the centre. Yeah? So they live near there, and they can see it every day. She can see it every day, and she longs to go and visit this monastery, which is gleaming on the top of half up the top of the cliff face. And she always says to her mother, when is this going to happen? When am I going to go and see it? The mother says, be patient. When the time comes, the monastery will call to you. And then there's a war. And her mum says, look, there's a war. It's happening. You need to leave. Go into the forest and come out after 3 days and find me. So that's the premise of the story.
Right.
When she's in the forest, she hears the musical notes of a Magic Kemenche calling to her.
Right.
The Kemenche, as we know, have 3 strings.
Yes.
Okay. And one of them is a sympathetic string. It is tuned exactly the same way as the second string. So it makes the same note, and it's like a drone, and it follows the other thing. And these things are not coincidental. They have a symbolism in the book. The fact that there are 3 separate voices that she hears. Okay. And that they echo within her brain, and they tell her, don't be afraid. Follow us up the mountain. So she's following the music, and you can see here how Stefanos Eleftheriadis has shown the thread of the music, almost like a life rope, threading her across and showing her the direction where she's going to go. So she ends up in Panagia Sumela monastery. And when she gets there, it's deserted. And one of the things that she notices is that the eyes of the saints in the icons on the walls have been scratched out. So you can see that. He's done it really well here. And obviously that's something where if you go to modern day Turkey and you have a look at the Byzantine monuments, you will notice that the eyes of the icons have been scratched out. And there's a religious reason for that. It's because the Islamic religion is an iconoclastic religion. They believe that these type of images offend God, so wherever they would go, they would deface them. And so she sees that, and she's scared because her, if you have a look earlier, and you mentioned this, her understanding of icons is there's Panagia, there's Christoulis looking at her. The eyes are always looking in all directions because they confer protection. All of a sudden, we get to the monastery, all that protection's gone. They can't see her. If they can't see her, how can they protect her?
Wow.
Little child is alone, little child is scared. The pillars that underpin her world of security no longer exist. Mum's gone. These saints that are watching over her aren't watching anymore. What is she going to do? So she wanders through the monastery and climbs these stairs. There's a big, big climb, which I describe, till she comes to a room with a light. She opens the door, and there's an old man there sitting by the fire playing the Kemenche. And it is his Kemenche that has been guiding her to this spot. So she arrives there, and the old man welcomes her, and she sits down and rests and sleeps and eats. Okay? And then when she's rested, he opens up a door, if you like, a portal, welcomes her to this place where everything is green. And there are all these children playing, and she's having a great time. It's almost like a garden of paradise, and they're dancing underneath a mulberry tree. And mulberries abound in Pondos. It's a very popular tree, mulberries and funduka, hazelnuts. That's what Pondos is known for. And they're reaching up to grab these mulberries, and sometimes they do, and the mulberries stain their face. And obviously, if you know anything about mulberries, when you get a mulberry stain, it looks like blood. And the whole idea of that is a metaphor for what's going on in the real world. What do kids do when they get scared? They often create alternate worlds for themselves. I'm not really here. I'm somewhere else where I'm safe. So psychologically, this girl's been taken away from really terrible things that are happening, which I don't mention in the book. I don't want to. You don't want to scare the kids. When they're old enough, you can use this book as a resource to introduce them to that. But when they're young, you don't want to go there altogether. The story needs to be able to tell itself. So here they are in this make-believe world that the old man has introduced to her. There are these children who are basically mulberry stained, and the book is dedicated first to my daughter, who I wrote it with, second to all mulberry stained children throughout the world. And she's there joining the dance. And he's playing for them. So she's there for a while, and as she's enjoying her time here and she's listening to the Kemenche, I describe a scene where she looks up at the sky and there are clouds. When she first went through the door, there were no clouds. It was a perfectly blue sky. Now there are clouds gathering. She looks up at the clouds and she sees the image of Panagia, the same Panagia that was on her wall, in the shape of the clouds. And the tear drops from the cloud, Panagia's eye, to Sumela's eye, and suddenly she can see what's going on down the mountain. She can see people running away. She can see burning. She can see despair. And she says, no, I have to leave. I can't stay here. So what happens is he opens up another portal with the music, and she follows the music into the portal. And basically that music wraps itself like a cocoon around her and insulates her against harm as she comes down Mount Sumela and makes her way to the sea, where she gets on the boat to leave. Okay? So this music, this consolation, this supernatural element is actually affording her protection. Whether you say that that's a physical protection, a psychological protection, an emotional protection, and there are three which just there correspond to the three strings of the Kemenche. Whether you attribute it to a religious protection, and in which case the three strings could be the Holy Trinity. That's up to you. But the motifs are there for you to discover. So she goes through the portal, and this page here, which you see, Politholo, is basically where she's experiencing, or she's seeing, but not actually experiencing, all the terrible things that are going on around her. And she arrives on the boat, and then suddenly, as she gets to Thessaloniki, which you can see here by the expertly rendered Arch of Galerius and the Lefkos Pyrgos, the White Tower, and as you said, very Schindler-esque, she meets her mum on the quayside in Thessaloniki, because all these stories must have a good ending.
Yeah, absolutely.
And So that's the story in very, very broad terms.
Right.
Okay, you can ask, well, who is this man that saves her, and why is he gathering all the children together? And the story ends with us going back to the mountain where he's still there protecting the children until the angels come past to bring them down the mountain. Okay, and then in the end, there are 2 pages here with resources. What is Sumela Monastery?
Yep.
Which is the main topos where the narrative unfolds itself. What is the Pondian genocide? So there's a paragraph about that if you want to teach your kids. And then, who is this mysterious and kindly old man that looks a little bit like Father Christmas who helps Sumela, and what's his role? And it may or may not be Saint Evgenios, the protector of Pondos. It could be, it may not be. It can be whoever you want it to be. But there's a little bit about him there as well, because he was a very important saint for Pondian Hellenism and the person to which Pondians prayed to in times of trouble.
Well, firstly, I think that the story is an amazing one, and I think that even though we've gone through it, the gems that are within it, you can only really understand the depth of what it goes into if you actually get the book and read.
It kind of helps.
Yes. I think that it's a great way of also, allowing young kids, especially the 2nd or 3rd generation, introducing them to certain words they might not have actually heard before.
I'll tell you this, and that was our Archbishop's input as well into the layout. He was the one that insisted that this be a bilingual edition.
Okay.
We weren't sure whether we wanted to do a separate Greek and a separate English, or whether we would just do an English. And he said, no, I want it bilingual. He says, I want the kids, even if they can't speak Greek, even if they don't know any Greek, I want them exposed to the parallel text on the page.
Yeah.
Just the sight of it alone, even if they can't engage with it, is enough. Yeah. Because that way they can see the different text, they know it's Greek, they will get some exposure to it. And I thought that was a very, very good way of approaching it.
I totally agree.
That was his idea. Well, let's have a read of the 3rd day when she's up on the mountain and she sees Panagia. So I'll read that bit. And that's on page 17.
17?
Absolutely it is. I hope they got the pages right. I generally do. Yep, there it is. So that's the one. So you want it in Greek, yeah?
In Greek would be nice.
Την τρίτη μέρα, όπως και την προηγούμενη, τα παιδιά έπαιζαν και χόρευαν όλα μαζί, ενώ ο γέροντας έπαιζε τον Κεμέντζε κάτω από τη μουριά. Ο ουρανός ήταν φωτεινός και σύννεφα δεν υπήρχαν πουθενά. Καθώς χόρευαν όλοι και αναπηδούσαν για να πιάσουν τα μούρα, το κοριτσάκι άκουσε την πρώτη από τις 3 χορδές να της ψιθυρίζει «Σουμέλα, Σουμέλα, μη φοβάσαι». «Σουμέλα, Σουμέλα, κοίτα ψηλά στον ουρανό», ζουζούνισε η δεύτερη χορδή. Το μικρό κορίτσι σήκωσε το βλέμμα του στον ουρανό. Είχαν μαζευτεί σύννεφα τώρα. Στις χνουδωτές καμπύλες τους φάνηκε ότι μπορούσε να διακρίνει το περίγραμμα μιας κυρίας καλυμμένης με πέπλο. Είχε μεγάλα, λυπημένα μάτια και τις χαμογελούσε με πόνο, ενώ τα απλωμένα της χέρια φάνταζαν τόσο απέραντα που κάλυπταν σχεδόν όλη την έκταση του στερεώματος. Από το μάτι της κυρίας κύλησε ένα παχύ, μελένιο δάκρυ που έπεσε πάνω στο πρόσωπο του μικρού κοριτσιού. «Τώρα έχεις μάτια αετήσια», κουδούνισε η τελευταία από τις χορδές. Το κοριτσάκι τώρα μπορούσε να δει ολόκληρο το βουνό, σαν να στεκότανε στην κορυφή του. Σιόντανε σαν να ήτανε ζωντανό. Ουρές ανθρώπων, όπως τα μυρμήγκια, ακολουθώντας ο ένας τον άλλον, το εγκατέλειπαν με τα κεφάλια τους σκυμμένα και τα μάτια τους να σπινθυρίζουν κατατρομαγμένα για τη θάλασσα. Επιβιβάζονταν σε βάρκες, καθώς τα κτίρια καίγονταν και κατέρεαν γύρω τους. Και οι κραυγές. So there you go.
So Dean, next step is, how do people get it?
How do people get it? That's a very important point. And it is offered currently in the 2 archdiocesan bookstores, which are in Sydney and in Melbourne. In Melbourne, it's at the Monastery Actionesti, which is in Northcote, Hardington Street, Northcote. Obviously, with restrictions now, it's a bit hard to get there.
Yeah.
They are available online. So you can call the monastery. You can have a look at the graphic on your screen. There is no graphic on our screen. We will provide one, I'm sure. And even if we won't, there'll be a link.
I'll throw something
Pete
over
thinks
it.
of everything. You can buy it from you can buy it online as well. So there is a link to actually go there and purchase the thing online. It will get sent to you in a very tastefully wrapped package right away. Children understand so much. children are just as layered, probably even more layered than we are. And you need to be able to provide for them in all things, and including in the tales that we tell them, and including the way that we pass on our identity, our community structures, and our heritage to them in a safe and loving way. It's very important. They need to feel safe, and they need to feel loved and secure. If you do not do this, something along the way breaks down. And if they are feeling safe and they are feeling loved, you can teach them anything. You can teach them about anything. Even the most difficult topics can be broached because they feel okay and comfortable. And that's what we're trying to do here with St. Andrew's Orthodox Press. Embrace the children, pass on what we have to pass on, or what we believe we should be passing on, because everyone has their own interpretation as to what that is, and that's fine. This is just one contribution to that broader dialogue and discourse in a safe and supporting way. I believe, and it's been told to me, I can't verify it for sure, that this here book that we're discussing today is the only book that has been written in Greek or in English directed towards children, which has the genocide as one of its major topics.
Wow.
There has not been written yet within our discourse a children's book about the genocide.
Wow.
So again, this is my contribution to that. How do you teach your children about topics like the genocide?
Yeah, and as you said,
it's not a it's a very difficult,
difficult topic to teach.
I'll give you an example. My children are watching a old Greek show, old children's show called Tokaplanitis Vitrinas on YouTube.
Okay,
and that, interestingly enough, takes place on my father's island. But there's a scene where Smyrni is burning, and they're showing the old footage. This was the other day. My daughter says to me, "What's that?" So I told her, "This is Smyrni. And your grandfather came from a village a little bit further inland, and he had to leave along with everyone else." And this was a revelation to her. So what do you mean? And I thought, I understand that we had to leave Greece to come here, Papu, but what about this?
Yeah.
And why did we have to leave? And why can't we come back? So all of these things, because migration and perennial migration, eternal migration is intrinsic to the Greek national consciousness. So that's my contribution. And my argument is that you can discuss all of these matters in a sensitive way. And also, you'll notice one thing. I don't mention the perpetrator at all. There is no mention of who committed the genocide, why they committed the genocide, because I do not want to instill hatred in children. When they are old enough or interested enough to read the historical facts, they can make up their own mind. For me, it's focusing on injustice as a whole, on the effect it has towards the small and the vulnerable. Do you remember we had a conversation once, and because you're a filmmaker, and that's what you do, about how we would film the genocide, and you actually made a short movie about the genocide, which was shown in the International Film Festival in Cannes. In France, you did this. So this is an amazing achievement, and I remember this film. It was very important. It was a trailblazer because it was the first time this had been treated in English in this way. Nothing had ever existed film-wise about the Pondian genocide. And I remember at the time telling you this: if I was to do a film about the Pondian genocide, which I never will because I lack complete skills in anything to do with film. I am anti-filmic in all aspects of my life, including the way I look on camera, as you can judge for yourself. I would be doing this. I would be putting the camera very low, knee high. I would have no voices, and it would be just recording sounds and everything happening at that length, because that height is the children's height.
Right.
So it would be children viewing
perspective,
what's going on. So I've also had that in my back of the mind. I was just writing this book. How would a child view this? Now, how do children absorb information and emotions about topics like this? So this is my contribution to that.
No, it's a fantastic contribution, and
I don't want to create hatred, and I don't want to instill racism. But what I do want to do is provide a jumping off point so that mothers, teachers, people that are reading this with children can talk about the fact that yes, bad things happen in this world. People do get discriminated against because of their gender, their race, their beliefs, and we have to take a stand. And we have to say that these things are not on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We get nowhere by blaming the perpetrator, even though the perpetrator must face justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and that goes without saying.
Mm.
But in terms of children, if we're going to build a better world, we need to teach them that certain things are bad and that certain things are not on, and that they have to take a stand. And this is one contribution. It's got a more humanitarian aspect. You can take this and say, well, look, this only didn't happen in Pondos. It happened in Rwanda. It happened in Bosnia.
Yeah.
It happened in Iraq the other day. It happens in Syria.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It happens in communities here with vulnerable people. So it's a jumping off point for a broader discussion about things that are wrong in this world and the way that we can take a stand and make them right. And if you are religiously inclined, and we make no bones about it, is the St. Andrew's Orthodox Press, which is publishing this book. You can ascribe certain ethical components to Panagia, the Holy Trinity, Saint Evmenius, any which way you want. You don't have to. I don't mention them by name.
No.
But that is there. Consciously.
I just think it's, as I said to you, anything that that has that level of thought put into it, that's got that level of love put into it. The fact is that you sought feedback from your target audience, which is absolutely fantastic. And apart from it being a great tool and a great resource for our community at large, and not just the community that I am a big part of, being the Pontian community, but the wider Greek community, and as you said, even the wider world community, because this story is is pretty much a huge metaphor for those particular atrocities that have occurred over the world, and it's a good way of teaching values to young children. And I think that the fact that it is laid, and the fact that you do not mitigate the or play down the intelligence of children is a great thing. You just assume that they are complex and sophisticated enough to understand the nuances within, and even if they don't, they will one day, or they might even do so at a subconscious level. So I absolutely love it. We're definitely going to be pushing it, and I think it's a great new template for the way children's books should be written, not just for ethnic communities like ours, but in general. Absolutely love it. So and can't wait. Apart from getting my teeth into this one here and spreading the
please
word.
don't bite the book. The book was printed here, and I believe that the dyes are non-toxic, but please don't bite the book.
It just looks so tasty.
Well, what can I tell you?
Well, Dean, thanks for that. We'll get this video out there as well, and hopefully it's a great success that would actually lead to more and more stuff being published.
Look, I hope everyone enjoys the book.
They will.
Again, I want to thank our Archbishop Makarios for being the driving force behind this publication, Stefanos Eleftheriadis for all the great work, for understanding, for feeling what I was trying to do and sharing that vision, Father Stefanos and all the boys at St. Andrew's Orthodox Press for the layout and the support, people like you, the Pondian community, all the organisations who are getting behind it, and the broader Greek community for their support, because the support has been overwhelming and, if I might say, very moving.
Thanks again, Dean. Keep on doing this stuff, and we'll be there right behind you, regardless of which area of Greece that it basically covers, because this stuff here, great resources, absolutely fantastic resources, and this is where I believe the direction should go. So
Ian Kevloia.
Ian Kevloia.
That's it, Charitias.